All right, so on Ross page 151, he introduces us to the particle na. You say that with me, na. Na. And this is a little particle that's going to often be attached to a volitional form in Hebrew. You'll see it written independently or joined with the makaf after the volitional verb form. So he gives you as an example this verb kavatsna in your example. Look at kavatsna. Kavotsna. Okay. What form of the verb kavats, which means to gather, do we have here? I have a vocal shava under the root 1. I have a holum with root 2. This is not the perfect. It would have been kavats. Kavats, kavatsa, kavatsta. This is kavots. Where's that coming from? It's coming from the imperfect, yik votes, tik votes, and so forth, where I've chopped off the prefix, chopped off the head, and I'm left with the imperative form. You see that? So that is an imperative, 2ms. And notice that the na has been added to it here. What the na has been supposed to be doing or functioning as is a particle of entreaty, where it accompanies a request or a command, sometimes to soften the command a little bit. But there are also times when Yahweh uses an imperative and there's a na following it. So I just was looking at a text with my my Hebrew reading class, and we saw Yahweh use this as he was telling Moses to do something. So I don't think Yahweh has any need to soften his command to Moses. So it doesn't always seem to function that way. But frequently it does occur where a subordinate is making a request of somebody who is in a higher social position. So should you translate it? In the Old King James Bible, when you see the little particle na attached to a volitional form, it usually translated it as please, now, or I pray thee. I don't really suggest that you translate the particle na, but just understand that it often signals a volitional form and indicates some kind of a petition or an entreaty. Okay? So kavatsna, gather the warriors. All right. Let's look at 20.6, and this is on page 152. This has to do with the negation of volitional verbs. That is to say, what we've just learned how to do with all these forms is we've learned how, as speakers, to express our will that somebody do something. Eat more chicken. May he eat more chicken. May I eat more chicken. Give me Chick-fil-A. But how do I tell somebody not to do something? How do I express my will that something not happen? This is a little trickier, okay? How are we going to negate volitional verb forms? Here is basically the rule. The particle all is going to precede a volitional verb form in order to negate it. What did you learn is the normal way to negate something? Low. Okay? Let me just spell it here. Low means not, right? So does all. Okay, but all is not when it's before volitionals. But what are the consonants in low? Well, lamed, aleph. What are the consonants in all? Aleph, lamed. Just flip the consonants and give it a pathak. Okay, so low and all. So these are both negators, but low negates non-volitional forms. All negates volitional forms. All of them except the imperative. Hebrew does not put any negative particle in front of a second person imperative. So if I want to say, Johnny, don't do that, I can't put low or all in front of the imperative in Hebrew. And you might be thinking, well, then the Hebrews must be very permissive parents who never said no to their children. Well, no, that's not how it works, okay? There is a way to negate imperatives, but you can't actually negate the imperative form. Hebrew has a different strategy for it. But any other volitional form is going to use the all in front of the volitional. So, just as an example, let's do a couple here. All right. Let's take this verb form right here. Let's do F kada. What type of a verb form is that? I have 3 root letters, an aleph prefix, and a comma te at the back end. That is a cohortative. Cohortative, right? Cal cohortative. When it's got an aleph, is it first common singular or first common plural? It's first common singular, okay? And so how would I translate this? Yeah, let me or may I pakad appoint. Okay? Now, what if I want to say, let me not appoint, or may I not appoint? What do I do? Are you sure I can't put lo in front of F-kada? You're not sure. You think I'm setting you up for a trick, huh? No, the answer is no, I cannot put lo. Is the cohortative a volitional verb? Yes, then to negate it, I can't use lo, I have to use all. So all, F-kada, means let me and may I not appoint. Okay? So this isn't rocket science, is it? You just got to remember, if you want to negate a volitional form, you got to put all in front of it instead of lo. Okay? Except for the imperatives. Imperatives cannot be negated. So let's look at what we do. To negate an imperative, I have to switch to the prefix second person, and then I can add a negative particle there. Okay? So, let's take a verb like shavat. Shavat means to rest. So how do I form the cal imperative to a mest of rest? I basically take the imperfect, tishbot, yishbot. The cal imperfect has those prefixes. Yishbot, tishbot, fishbot. Well, no, that's not a form. All right, and then I chop off the prefix, and I'm left with shavot. Shavot, okay? So that's the imperative to a mess. Rest. Now, how do I say don't rest? Don't rest. Can I say lo shavot? Are you sure? Why not? Because Hebrew doesn't allow it. When Hebrew children try to say lo shavot, they can't get the words out. No, you can't do that. You can't say lo shavot. Okay? Not possible. Can I say all shavot? Don't rest. Nope. See? You can't even say it. See? It's impossible. No, just teasing. So, no, you can't say all shavot or lo shavot because this is an imperative. You cannot negate an imperative. So how are we going to do it? Here's how we do it. Okay? There's 2 strategies in Hebrew. You will either do lo plus the imperfect second person or all plus the jussive second person. Okay? Lo plus the imperfect second person or all plus the jussive second person. Now, what is the difference between using lo plus the imperfect and all plus the jussive? It's sort of like the difference between this. Thou shalt not versus don't, and whatever the verb is. Okay? So, let me give you an example. I am, let me just specify this real quickly. We would call the first kind of prohibition a general prohibition. I'm giving a generic sort of blanket prohibition about what not to do. All plus the jussive second person is a specific prohibition. On a particular occasion, I'm trying to tell somebody not to do something. So as an example, let's say I'm talking to my little 3-year-old or 4-year-old, and it's time because the little one is now walking and going into the kitchen and is starting to touch things, and it becomes a very dangerous situation. And so we're using the stove a lot, and we don't want the child to burn his hand. And so we tell the child, now, JP, you see the stove? Hot, hot. You shall not touch the stove, ever, ever. What am I doing? I'm giving a general prohibition that applies in all sorts of circumstances, okay? And so I would use lo plus the imperfect second person of touch to my son. You shall not touch the stove. And then I leave JP there and I walk away. And he thinks I'm gone. And I sneak and look around the corner and watch what he does. And he walks up to the stove and he starts to reach up out there. And I jump out and scream, "Don't touch that!" How would I say that in Hebrew? All plus the second person jussive. Okay? Because it's a specific prohibition to not do something that he's about to do. All right. Now, what is this going to look like in real life Hebrew? It's going to look like this. Take a look. Lo tishbot and all tishbot. Did you notice that tishbot, the imperfect tishbot, and the jussive tishbot, those look exactly the same, don't they? Because remember how in the third person jussives, let him not do something, looks exactly like the imperfect. He will not do something. Okay? And that's true of the second person jussives. This is the place where you will see second person jussives. Is when you want to tell someone not to do something, you use all plus the second person jussive. And it's just going to look like the second person imperfect. So how can you tell the difference and parse properly when a negative command is being given? You always have to ask yourself which negative particle is being used. And so here is my little jingle memory device. All always negates the jussive when the forms are identical. Okay? If you have lo plus what looks like an imperfect, and you have all before what looks like an imperfect, just remember, all always negates the jussive, not the imperfect. If all is in front of something that looks like an imperfect, it's still not an imperfect. It's a jussive. Okay? All always negates a jussive form if it could, objectively speaking, be imperfect or jussive because the forms are indistinguishable. Okay? How would I translate lo tishbot? General prohibition. Yeah, or you shall not rest. Okay? So, I'm an employee, I'm hiring somebody, and I say, look, the work week is Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. You shall not rest. Mondays through Fridays, 8 to 5. Okay? Al tishbot, on the other hand, being a jussive, gives a specific prohibition. How might I translate that? Just don't rest. Okay? Hey, Billy, I know you're tired, but brah, don't rest. Come on, we got work to do. You see? That's a specific instance that I'm addressing. Okay? And I would use all tishbot. Don't rest. That make sense? Okay. Which means what?
Like you will not learn the way of the nations.
Oh, okay.
So that's what that is.
Yeah, probably. Using lo plus a general prohibition, right? Yeah, it's sort of like standing orders. Okay. Okay, on this handout, we're addressing the last part of the Ross chapter, and this has to do with what Ross calls the indirect volatives, or volative sequences. What Russ is just trying to communicate here is that sometimes you're going to have volitional verb forms in sequence with other verb forms, and how do you read those together? Okay? And there's basically three sorts of sequences of verb forms that involve volitionals that you might see. Here's the first one. And by the way, when we look at sequences, what we're saying is one clause followed by another clause, or one sentence followed by another sentence. And the order is moving from right to left here because this is Hebrew, isn't it? So we're doing right to left here, going from this side to this side. So what Ross tells us first is that sometimes you could have an imperative in Hebrew, and that's going to be issuing a command to a you. An imperative is always addressing a you. And the imperative can be followed by another clause that has a WCP form, what is a perfect form with a vav in front of it. And that form will continue the nuance of the imperative that came before it, and it will issue another command and volitional idea or an instruction. Okay? And the most famous example of this is found in Deuteronomy chapter 6. Shema Yisrael. You see Shema here? That is an imperative. Can you tell that's an imperative? With imperatives, we take the imperfect and we chop off the head, chop off the prefix. Tishma, drop the ti, and we have Shema. Shema, okay? So hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And then the next clause is v'ahavta. What's that? This is the perfect conjugation pattern with the ta ending, right? That's 2ms and the perfect with a vav in front. That's a WCP form. It will not be translated as a simple past tense statement of fact. It wouldn't even make sense. Hear, O Israel, and you loved the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength. Right? It's rather an instruction in sequence with an imperative right before it. Hear, O Israel, and you shall love. Okay? Hear, O Israel, and you shall love the Lord your God. Okay? So you can have imperatives followed by WCP forms that continue the instructional, volitional nuance of that imperative. The second sort of sequencing you could see is an imperative followed by another imperative that happens to have the conjunction vav in front of it. And when you see that, it's just two commands that are conjoined or coordinated. Do this and do that. Do this and do that. Okay? So, example, zachor, from zahar, to keep. This is the imperative form. Remember, imperatives are formed by taking the imperfect and chopping off the prefix or the head. Tizkor becomes zikor. So keep the commandments. Shemor. There is an imperative with the vav. That's not a perfect, it's an imperative. So keep and shemor, observe. Keep and observe, okay? So these two are not too difficult to get. It's the last one, which is a little bit more complicated because there's room for some confusion. So let's make this a little bit bigger and we'll talk about that. Okay, so again, reading from right to left, I could have, for the first verb form, any volative, any volitional form. That is, imperatives, justives, or cohortatives, all of those are volitional. And that would be giving a command or expressing will. And then the next clause in sequence with that could be a conjunction vav plus any prefix form. What are my prefix conjugation forms? The first one we learned was the imperfect, right? Those have prefixes. The imperative chops off the prefix, so that's not a prefix form, okay? But the cohortative and the jussive do have the prefixes too. So any of those three sorts of conjugation patterns following a volitional form can then have this semantic value. I issue a command, and then when I get to the conjunction vav plus a prefix form, that indicates the reason or the purpose for the command. Now, here's where students will get confused. If you have a series of root letters like this and a nutty prefix like that and then a vav before it, you're thinking, that is a WCI form, which is past time. But the question is that a WCI form? Is that a Vayiktal form? And the answer is no. WCI forms have a vav and a pathak and then a doubling dot inside one of the nutty prefixes. If your vav is a simple vav, a normal vav, a vav with a vocal shava, which is what vavs come standard with, it's not a WCI. Okay? And so let's just look at this example here. Here's the imperative kathov. Write. Moses? Kathov. Write. Va'ezkara. Write. And then we're going to give this a nuance of purpose. In order that I may remember. Okay? Zakar is to remember. Aleph is I. And this is a cohortative just with a simple regular shava attached. Write something down that I may remember. If you try to parse this and understand it as a WCI, it would be write this and past time I remembered, which doesn't make any sense. Okay? What we're doing is issuing sequences of verb forms, here commanding, and then this would be the result of the command. So write that I may remember. The second one is nishlacha. That's a cohortative with a prefix nun and a comment say on the back. That's first common plural, right? Let us shalach. Let us send. Nishlacha. Why? V yilkod. Lakad is to capture. Yilkod. He will capture. Add the vav, v yilkod, that he may capture. Okay? Notice this is not vayilkod, WCI. This is yilkod with a simple normal vav here. Okay? And it gives the nuance of purpose. I'm asking that we send this so that this may happen, that he may capture. And then this third example, here we have a jussive, right? These are volitional verb forms, imperatives, cohortatives, jussives. Yishkav, let him lie down, or may he lie down. V yishbot. Normal vav, simple vav, with a prefix conjugation pattern form, that he may rest. Okay? It's not a WCI, or you'd have to translate this as let him lie down and he rested. Okay? But that's not what we're trying to say here. Does that make sense?
So it just kind of tell you
Why?
can,
The purpose of the commands or the volitional statements here. Do these things so that these things may happen. Okay? So we should have some examples of this in the homework so you have some opportunities to practice. But at least we want to introduce the concept of these volitional sequences.